This is the Lane Transit District Stiff Advisory Committee, and today is Tuesday, October 8th. And welcome here at LTD, and welcome to those who are online. Looks like we have several attendees online. We'll go ahead and get started. This meeting goes from 5 p.m. to 6:30 p.m. And we will go ahead and get started. We have a lot to cover. We have, I think, some guest speakers as well. I'm going to quickly go ahead and do roll call. So when I call your name, just say here. And please, if I mispronounce your name, just let me know so I know for next time. So, my name is David Reeser. I work at the University of Oregon. I'm the transportation director and have been on the STIF advisory committee in the past. And I was absent at the first meeting and then apparently assigned to chair. So don't be absent again. Let's go ahead with roll call. Phil Barnhart.
Phil's here on the great Zoom instruments.
Awesome. Thank you, Phil. Nice to see you. Kelly Clark.
Clark here. I'm a principal transportation at the Lane principal transportation planner at the Lane Council of Governments, awesome. And co-manage LCOG's Link Lane Transit Services.
Awesome. Thank you, Kelly. Josh Kaczynski.
Present.
And Josh is our vice chair as well. Brenda Kosidar. Right. Thank you, Brenda. Welcome. Susie Lacer. Hi. Nice to meet you. Joshua Myatt.
Present on Zoom.
Awesome. Nice to see you, Joshua. Eugene Oregon.
Here.
Hi, Eugene. Welcome.
Here.
Cosette Reese.
Here.
Thank you, Cosette. And then I just introduced myself, and then Carrie Turner.
Here.
Hi, Carrie. And Vidal Francis.
Present.
Thank you. Gino Grimaldi. He's absent. And Pete Knox.
Here.
Hi, Pete. All right, so we'll go ahead and get rolling. A quick agenda review. Hopefully you all received the email with the agenda ahead of time. But we'll go ahead and review this quickly. We'll have a moment for public comment, and then we will have the STIF discretionary and statewide transit network program presentation. There'll be a process overview and project overview, and then committee voting and recommendation. And then we will also have next and future meeting agendas. And actually, that's something I'm hoping we could maybe just talk briefly about the next meeting, if that's all right, to move that up. Okay. And then after that, we'll go ahead and adjourn. So one thing I mentioned to staff the other day and wanted to bring it up to the committee was when I was looking at the calendar, I noticed our next meeting is for November 5th. That is also election day. And so that could be problematic in that I don't want to prohibit somebody from having to choose, or prohibit them from voting, of course, or coming here, right? And so also, since we're open to the public, I want to make sure we are accessible to anybody who wants to come. So I would propose that we try to adjust it that same week, though, just keep us on track, and consider either Monday the 4th or let's see, Wednesday the 6th or Thursday the 7th. So first of all, let me just hear from committee members if you feel like it's a good idea generally to adjust that. I'm seeing some head nods, but
I had noticed the same thing.
did you? Okay. Right.
Yeah.
Sit here quietly for an hour and a half.
Right. Exactly. Right. Yeah. So, okay.
Could I ask people to turn their mics on so we can actually hear them when they speak?
Yeah, you bet. Great. Just a reminder to all of us to,
And this is Phil on the internet. Either the 4th or the 6th, it works fine for me if that's the will of the committee.
okay, great, thank you. Other committee members, any thoughts on moving? Brenda?
I just realized I'm going to be out of town the whole week.
Okay.
So,
All right, so it doesn't
No
matter. Okay, fair. No worries. Thank you for letting us know. Others? Yeah.
Yeah, I think that's more than appropriate. I'm actually open every other evening for that week, so.
Okay, awesome. Thank you. Speaking with LTD staff a few days ago, it sounded like there was a preference for Monday, November 4th. Would that work for everybody? I'm seeing some head nods online. Yeah.
Yeah.
Thumbs up. Yeah.
Yeah, I think, this is Kelly. I think the 4th works for me and not the 6th. So
Great.
there we go.
Okay, perfect. Do you guys feel like, do we need a vote for that, or are we just good with reaching consensus?
I think we've reached consensus.
Okay.
I think that's fine.
Perfect.
Yeah,
Okay.
we'll just update the material so that everybody has an updated invitation for the
Okay.
4th.
Great. Thank you, Kathleen. All right, thanks everybody for fielding that question and being flexible. I think that'll serve all of us well, shifting that date. So let's go ahead and move down to agenda item 4 for public comment. Do we have anybody from the public who would like to speak? All right.
Nobody online.
Nobody online. Okay, so seeing or hearing from nobody, we'll go ahead and close the public comment. And we'll move down to agenda item 5, the STIF Discretionary and Statewide Transit Network Program. And I believe staff has a presentation for us.
We do, and we're having a quick technical issue here. I'm going to try again, Allie. There. Okay. Okay. Great. So we had talked last time about the various sources of funding within the STIF program. Kate had talked to you about the STIF formula funds, which make up the lion's share of the STIF program, 90% of the funds. But I've grayed that out tonight because we're not going to think about that tonight. We're going to save that for November. Tonight, we are going to focus on the STIF discretionary and the statewide transit network program funds. And I'm just going to do a quick overview because I know I talked about this last time, but I know that was a lot to take in, so I thought a little refresher might help. So the STIF discretionary fund, that makes up 5% of STIF funds. We are anticipating $12 million being available statewide this funding cycle. And for the statewide transit network programs, there are 2 programs, the STIF Intercommunity Fund, where we're anticipating $10 million statewide, and the federal funds that we talked about that get thrown in there as well, the FTA Section 5311F intercity funds. And we're anticipating $3 million statewide for those funds. The important thing that I pointed out last time that I wanted to point out again about the STIF discretionary and the statewide transit network program funds is that it's a competitive grant process. The formula funds are assigned by geographic region, but these funds are all done through a competitive bidding process. And it's going to be very competitive this year. Tonight, we're going to look at 7 local applications. Overall, statewide, there were 90 applications. You can see there's a total of 25 million available in funds. The total statewide ask is more than double that, 61 million in requests for funding. Let me just briefly walk through what each of these funds is about, and then we'll move on to reviewing projects. So the discretionary funds, again, 12 million statewide. It includes a number of different types of eligible projects, capital projects, management, planning and research, transit adjacent projects, and pilot operations. One thing that is not eligible under the discretionary funds are ongoing operations. So if you have a transit service that you're already operating and want to get funding to continue that, the STIF discretionary fund is not the place to look for that funding. A 20% match is required from applicants. This can potentially go down to a 10% match, but given how oversubscribed these funds are in this funding cycle, it's unlikely that that 10% match will be awarded. The STIF Intercommunity Fund, again, as I said, 10 million anticipated statewide. Similar types of projects are eligible. It does exclude the transit adjacent projects that were included under the STIF discretionary fund. And ongoing operations projects are allowed under the STIF intercommunity funds. Again, 20% match is required. There's that option again for the 10% match, which we think is unlikely because of the oversubscription. And finally, the FTA 5311F funds. These are funds that have some very specific criteria for projects. The projects need to cover long distances, so 20 plus miles, or close a significant gap in the statewide transit network. It's got to be a service that's not designed primarily as a commuter service. They have the capacity to carry luggage, and they make meaningful connections to the statewide transit network, including other types of transportation such as rail. They require a larger match if it's an operations project. A 50% match from applicants is required. If it's a capital project or project administration, it's the 20% match. A couple of just notes about these funding sources. Applicants have the option to apply for one to all three of the funding sources, and they can receive funds from the various sources. So you'll see in your packet that some of the projects apply for multiple funding sources, and they may qualify to get funds from different sources as well. We're at the point right now where ODOT staff have reviewed all of the applications. They've reviewed them for completeness, and they've forwarded them back to the local areas for review and comment and prioritization if we choose to do so. The applications come to this committee, and they also go to the local area, the local area commission on transportation. With the input from both this committee and the local area commission on transportation, ODOT will take into consideration all of those comments, any ranking that we do, any recommendations that we provide, and they will then take that and review the project applications themselves, and then we'll go through the timeline in a second, but they'll then forward those on to the PTAC. Kate, help me out for a second, the PTAC?
Public Transportation Advisory Committee.
Thank you. There's so many acronyms, and it gets to be acronym soup after a while. So thank you. Okay. So here's our timeline, which we looked at last time as well. We're sort of falling right in the middle of this now. You'll see that applications were due September 5th. We received those applications back from ODOT at the end of September and quickly pulled them together into this packet that we sent out to all of you to review. Recommendations from this committee as well as the Area Commission on Transportation are due back to ODOT by October 22nd. We're on sort of a tight time frame here, which is why we have so much to cover tonight, because you'll do your review and recommendations. That recommendation will then go on to the LTE Board of Directors, which will then forward all of that information on to ODOT so that they can continue their review. Throughout the fall, the Oregon Department of Transportation will be doing their review of applications, goes to the Public Transportation Advisory Committee in December, and we should hear some kind of indication in early December about what the recommendations are for funding. And then the final decision is made by the Oregon Transportation Commission that's going to meet in early winter. Dave.
Yeah, I just have a quick question. The Lane Area Commission on Transportation, if I understand, they're reviewing applications kind of simultaneously as we are, but we're making recommendations to the LTD board, and then their recommendations go straight, is it to the OTC, right?
That's correct.
And then
Closer to ODOT.
are they looking at a broader list of applications, but these included, or is it the exact same?
They're looking at the same list that we're looking at.
Okay. Great, thank you.
Yeah. So I think this is a good time then for me to pause and we can start our presentations. We've invited representatives of each agency to come and talk about their projects. And yeah, Dave.
Yeah, I just wanted to make sure that any other committee members had any process questions before we go over to projects.
Carrie.
Just one.
This is Phil on the internet. I don't know if you can do anything about it, but the camera is mostly on the administrator for this meeting. I have not seen anything yet showing the stage left side of the committee room. I don't know if that can be fixed or if we're simply stuck with it. But for public viewing or for those of us who are on the internet, the camera is a fabulous camera. It's just not aimed correctly.
Okay, thank you for letting us know, Phil. Well, but actually, let me just ask, is that something we can fix, you think, or not?
Sorry, I am curious if you can see the PowerPoint. I'm using share screen. As far as how to angle the owl, I'm not sure.
Okay.
Yeah, I can see the PowerPoint because I can move to that on my own system. But you're showing yourself virtually all the time. And I think you probably should be able to turn that off so that it actually shows the room in a more useful way. I mean, it's fabulous to be able to see you, but I don't think that's a useful camera angle. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Phil. We just moved the owl and then we're kind of working that issue. So thank you for your patience. Thank you for bringing that up. And then Carrie, I think you had something a question?
Kathleen, can you just remind me, so we're talking about the discretionary funds today, which is the small
Correct.
bucket.
Yep.
And then we're prioritizing those. And then how does all the prioritization work between the full overall bucket of I mean, because some of these projects are eligible for any of the state funding, is that right?
That's right. And
The
I think
formula.
after we have the presentations, we can talk about whether we want to prioritize or not. We don't have
Okay.
to. We can choose whether we want to or not. And Dave can sort of give a sense of what the impacts are either way of prioritizing
Okay.
or not prioritizing. In terms of the overall bucket, you mean the full 90 applications statewide?
Yes.
We only focus on our local projects. There'll be similar committees meeting all over the state who also will be looking at their local projects. That information all goes on to ODOT, and then ODOT, I believe, will do a prioritization overall of all the projects.
Okay, and then we'll evaluate those eligible for the formula funds separately in
Yes,
November?
well, in November, we'll start working on the formula fund projects.
Okay, thanks.
Yes, thanks, Gary.
Any other committee questions that you might have for Kathleen before we start projects? All right, well, thank you. Let's see, Kathleen, back to you for project summaries.
Yeah, if you would like to, Dan, come on up and.
A quick process check. So are we asking each applicant for about 3 minutes?
Yeah, what we're going to do is have each applicant speak for about 3 minutes, and then we'll have time after the presentation for any questions and answers that you might want.
Do I press that button? Is that right?
You got
Okay,
it.
great. All right. Good evening. My name is Rob Interfeld. I'm Transportation Planning Manager for the City of Eugene, and I'm here to talk about our application for the Downtown and Riverfront Circulator Pilot. So this pilot project builds on the insights gained from the ongoing Downtown and Riverfront Public Transportation and Shared Mobility Study, which was conducted in partnership with LTD and with support from Nelson Nygaard Consultants, who conducted the system review for LTD that most of you are probably familiar with. The project team conducted extensive outreach to stakeholders in order to inform what we're proposing. And we heard some of the stakeholders we heard from include AARP, St. Vinny's, Homes for Good, Cascadia Mobility, OB Companies, and Adkins and Dame, which is the developer of the downtown riverfront. So this pilot project aims to improve the ability of people to travel around downtown Eugene, especially older adults and people living with disabilities. The pilot project would provide service to emerging transit markets and create new transit connections. And this would include improving connections between key destinations in downtown Eugene, including the newly developed riverfront neighborhood and the new city hall, connecting older adults and people living with disabilities who live downtown to affordable groceries and pharmacies on 18th Avenue, connecting new student housing along Broadway to groceries and to campus. And you may be familiar, there's like hundreds and hundreds of new student apartments on Broadway, including most recently right across from the federal courthouse. Connecting UBO students and West Campus neighborhoods to the Amtrak station, and providing an option for getting around downtown without a car, especially for trips that are longer than a walk or a bike ride. So what we're proposing is called a circulator type of service, and it focuses on high frequency, ideally every 15 minutes or more, service within a compact area to facilitate short trips. It supports seamless integration of transit services. Stakeholder feedback revealed a strong interest in this rather than the MGO type of service on-demand service we had before. And we're looking at basically two different routes. And so unfortunately, we can't really show you graphics, but if you have good eyesight, you can see here. One of the routes would go through the new downtown riverfront neighborhood. Now the streets there are really narrow, so we're looking at probably some sort of small buses, potentially would contract with a private operator that would provide like electric buses that would operate through that riverfront neighborhood, but the route would also use Patterson and Hilliard to get down to sort of the Safeway and Hirons area on 18th and come back up Willamette and Olive to 5th Avenue. So it would really hit a lot of those key destinations in the downtown, affordable housing, senior housing like Olive Plaza, Yapoa Terrace, the Amtrak station on 5th Street Market. We think it would be a great way for people to get around. And then the other route would expand more, and I know I'm just about out of time, on the number 1 bus. I'm just about done. On the number 1 route, which currently serves downtown, but only is like every hour at most, basically, but it would go all the way down to 18th. It would use a regular bus. We'd work with LTD on that. But the city is applying for the grant, but there's a lot of conversations we're having with LTD about what makes the most sense. And I will stop there, and I'd be happy to answer any questions.
Great, thank you, Rob.
Thank you.
Appreciate that.
Let's leave the mic on.
Let's see. To staff, do you guys have a preference, or committee members? Do you want to do questions now as each applicant presents, or hear from everybody and then ask questions? Anybody have a preference?
I have a preference to ask now.
Yeah. Okay. I think that seems appropriate. So. Okay, Josh, you have a question?
Yeah, my first question is, can you please hold the picture of the routes up to the owl?
For that's a great idea.
Joining us online, and maybe, yeah, it's picking you up.
Bill, can you see this?
Up higher.
Up higher, okay.
Yeah.
So this is the route that would expand on the number 1 route that currently serves the part of the downtown, and then this other one is the one that would go into the downtown riverfront neighborhood, where there's like hundreds of new housing units being built, some of which have already opened, some of which are under construction, with a lot more to come. It would also serve our new park and urban plaza that we're going to be building soon along the river. So that's this one here, but it may require a smaller vehicle, and that's why we potentially contract out with a private provider for that.
Thank you.
I have a quick question, Rob. Can you remind me what is the planned duration of the pilot?
So we're looking at, this is all in flux because we're also probably going to be applying for formula funds, which I know are going to be oversubscribed too. And so there's a negotiation around how much are we going to, there's kind of the ideal, like 10-minute service would be great, but it's really expensive, right? So one thing we're looking at is doing like an 18-month pilot where we would start January or so of 2026 and then go through the end of the FY27 fiscal year, I think it would be. So it'd be a year and a half long, starting January 26.
Thank you.
Yep.
Other questions from committee members? I see Kelly, I think, has her virtual hand up.
I do. Thanks, Rob. I had a question kind of along the same lines as the scalability of this project. And maybe you kind of got to that as far as like frequency of service, but if there's anything else you can talk about.
Right. So how the duration of the pilot, how frequent the service is. So, I mean, we really wouldn't want to go less than like every 20 minutes, but 15 minutes would be better. But, it's expensive, right? When you're running buses so frequently like the MX. And so that's just, if we do go with a private operator for the pilot, it would be less expensive. It would give us an opportunity to see like, what's the ridership like? Are people really using this or not? And then as we look to maybe the subsequent STIP cycle, it would really inform that discussion. Because I think until you really put something like this out there, it's hard to know like how much are people going to use it.
Okay. Well, in the interest of time, I don't see any other hands up. Want to keep us moving to the next project, but maybe at the end, we'll just do one last call for questions as well. So let's see. So the second project, we have Lane Council of Governments, the Eugene Florence Connector route.
Yeah, and this is Kelly. I'll be speaking on behalf of the Lane Council of Governments for these next two projects. The first one is our Florence to Eugene connector route, and this is a route that travels 60 miles one way, 120 miles round trip between the Eugene Amtrak station and the grocery outlet in Florence. It stops at downtown Eugene, Veneta, Mapleton, the Three Rivers Casino, downtown Old Town Florence, and then the grocery outlet store before returning its trip back. We operate this route in partnership with the CT-CLUSI, the Confederate Tribes of Coos, Loroqua, and Siuslaw Indians. And we've operated it since February 2020 and seen significant ridership since we began operations. Year after year, we've seen increases in ridership. So we've purchased bigger buses to accommodate ridership. We were also able to expand service, right? Prior to our service expansion, we operated 7 days a week with 2 round trips per day, one in the AM, one in the PM. With our service expansion that began right before summer, we expanded service to 3 round trips, 4 days per week. And that's been pretty successful in helping to like smooth out our ridership demand. And we're feeling like we're in a good space with that. We're applying for the 3 different types of funding as shown on the screen here. Our dollar amounts are shown here. I don't think I need to read those unless you'd like me to, but they're pretty consistent with our operating. We're asking for funds for operating and administrative services, and that will cover the costs of that along with our formula fund asks, which will be before this committee as well. Happy to answer any questions.
Great.
Or I can move on to the second one and we can bundle questions or.
Let's, thank you, Kelly. Let's see if there's any committee questions. Anybody have questions on this particular project? All right. Well, Kelly, you can go ahead and start on your next project summary. Thank you.
Thank you. Yep, our second project here is the Florence to Yachats connector. And this is a service that began in 2019 and operates between the communities of Florence and Yachats. Like the Florence to Eugene connector, which I didn't mention, these are both operated by contract operators that we have contracts with. And the Florence to Yachats connector begins at the grocery outlet in Florence, has one stop at the Carl G. Washburn State Park, and then terminates in the northernmost spot in Yachats at the old cabin in Yachats and meets up with the service going on to Newport, and then returns this trip back to Florence. It operated, before we expanded service, operated 6 days a week, 4 round trips a day. And now with a service expansion that we were able to start in the summer, it now operates 7 days per week with 4 round trips per day. We are asking for the 2 types of funding shown on the screen here, and are also asking for operations and administrative costs for this route. And we'll be back before this committee for formula funds for this project as well.
Excellent. Thank you, Kelly. Let's take a moment, see if there are any committee questions. Looking around, not seeing, or yes, Carrie.
I may have missed it in the write-ups, Kelly, and it's probably in there, but did you have an estimate of the number of riders that these connectors were currently serving?
Yeah, so I have it on my own personal screen in case I was asked this most excellent question. So this is for Eugene, Florence. In 2023, we had a total of 8,994 riders. Unfortunately, well, not unfortunately, but we don't have the full number of riders yet for this year because we haven't completed 2024, but we're trending overall higher than that by just a little bit. And then for Florence to Yachats, our ridership for 2023 was 2,748. And so far in 2024, we've had 2,355 riders. So we're seeing that we'll likely at least reach the same, if not maybe more riders this year for Florence to Yachats. Thank you for asking. Does that answer, or would you like more details on riders?
No, that answers it. Thank you.
Oops. All right, great. Thank you, Carrie, for that question. Thank you, Kelly, for the answer. Any other committee questions before we go on to project number 4?
This is Phil. I may have been wool gathering. Did she indicate, or could you say again what the frequency of these 2 systems are?
Absolutely. The bus going between Florence and Eugene is now currently operating 7 days per week. We have an AM trip and a PM trip in all 7 of those days. And then we have a midday trip that is run 4 of the days. And the midday trip is run on Monday, Tuesday, Thursdays, and Fridays.
And which direction do these trips go? Are they round trips or?
Yep, they're round trip between, so well, sorry, I'll just, I can mention the Florence to Yachats as well, but just for the Eugene Florence, it's round trip between downtown Eugene to Florence and then back to Eugene. It doesn't dwell very long in Florence. The bus has a quick turnaround and makes a quick round trip to Eugene. For Florence, for the Florence to Yachats bus, the frequency is also 7 days per week, and there's 4 round trips per day. And it goes between the Florence grocery outlet store and turns around at the old log church in Yachats, and then comes back to Florence right away. It doesn't dwell long in Florence or Yachats at all.
And is it reasonable to assume that it provides a decent connection with the other services to the north and to the south?
Yeah, thank you for asking. Both routes, we've worked hard, we as in Kate, your staff member here, has worked really hard to make sure that those connections are as close as possible to make sure that the ride is seamless for people moving from service to service. We know that's always a challenge with kind of networks that are made up from different service providers. So we've worked hard with our other service providers that we connect with to make sure that the rides are as seamless as possible.
Thank you.
Great. Good questions, everybody. Thank you, Kelly. Not seeing any more hands up. Let's go ahead and keep the process moving. So actually, we're on project number 4. The next 4 are presented by LTD, and they'll have 3 minutes for each project, just to clarify. So thank you for joining us, and we'll go ahead and start your 3 minutes for this project number 4.
Great. Hello, committee members. I'm John Allen here to speak to LTD STIF discretionary projects. First up, we have the Diamond Express. This is a service that we've operated for many years using 5311F funds primarily. We're also including intercommunity funds as part of our ask due to the better match rate requirements that go along with that. The Diamond Express service connects Oak Ridge with the metropolitan area. So we found this is particularly important as lifeline service that connects folks who might not otherwise have transportation options to connect to the overall community, which in turn connects to our fixed route system, to the airport, to Amtrak. Rail actually goes by Oak Ridge, but does not have a designated stop. So we interline with Amtrak so that someone can purchase fare through Amtrak if they're taking rail, connect to the bus, and have essentially a seamless experience back and forth. People are using the Diamond Express to connect to work, so we're having a lot of commuters ride, folks who have classes, they're going to LCC or to U of O. We're in particular serving low-income populations, and we're sensitive to that with a very fair fare. So $2.50 will take you on a trip that takes about an hour. It's one of the best deals you can get on transit. And so in addition, for someone who purchases round trip fare, we include a complimentary pass on our fixed route system for folks who need to transfer to be able to go elsewhere. So if somebody needs to go to work or to school, it can be their one-stop shop for all their transit needs. We're doing a fair amount of service. We do 4 trips on weekdays, and we've implemented Saturday service. It also allows folks who want to go to Oak Ridge for recreation, so mountain biking, be able to spend time in the area. It creates an option. It also is incredibly efficient as opposed to the same number of passengers that we transport using single occupancy vehicles. So very environmentally friendly for us to operate a service like this, but particularly when we've noticed there are challenging conditions to be able to go back and forth, whether that's snow and ice or wildfire evacuations, having this type of service has been vitally important to serve a community that otherwise doesn't have many other transportation options. Questions about Diamond Express service?
Great. Thank you for that brief presentation. Anybody have any questions? Yeah, Josh.
Are you planning on applying for formula funds for Diamond Express as well?
Yes. So I'll note there's all discretionary applications come with a match requirement. And for Diamond Express, we've historically and would continue to look to STIF formula funds to match alongside our discretionary funds.
Thank you.
Other questions or comments? All right. Well, let's go. Thank you for that. We'll go ahead and move to project number 5, and I believe you're presenting that as well.
Yep, I'll be here. So
all right.
The planning for a Florence transportation hub. You've heard many of the presenters today just happen to mention the grocery outlet in Florence. So this just happens to be in the middle of Florence, and coincidentally, that is where many of the current transportation services meet. So you've heard Florence Eugene, Florence Yachats. We have our Rhodey Express green and blue routes currently intersect there, and then the Coos Bay Florence Express all terminate at this grocery outlet, and we're trying to coordinate all of these different services so that people can have as seamless a transportation experience as possible. Challenging when we're just in the middle of the road without essentially a planned transit hub to be able to do so. There's limited space for us to be able to do that. So all of these services can't all park there at the same time. It's just logistically not possible. The idea of the planning for a Florence hub is to have a more strategic planned space where we'd be able to have all of these different services essentially intersect in a planned area, which could, but not necessarily, be in front of the grocery outlet in Florence. So this would support planning efforts to be able to, in the future, have a shovel-ready project that we could then pursue other or additional funding types to be able to support construction of a transportation hub in the city of Florence. So with the idea that we could have connectivity for all these different services in a more seamless way.
All right, excellent. Do we have any questions? Hands? Anybody online? No hands? All right. Thank you for that presentation. Let's move to project number 6. This is Rural Lane County On-Demand Shuttle.
Great. So we currently have a pilot project that we partner closely with LCOG to support transportation in South Lane. So that's around the areas of Creswell, Cottage Grove, and all the way down to the South County line to be able to provide transportation, particularly for people in rural areas who might not otherwise have access to public transit. So it's a little bit different in the metropolitan area where it may be inconvenient or someone may be a little bit further away, but we have folks in rural areas who just genuinely do not have access to transit services. So we see that there's well-used ridership on this pilot program for the current year, and we're proposing the idea that we expand this so that not only are we looking at serving folks within South Lane County, but there's many unserved or underserved areas throughout Lane County where people in rural areas don't have access to transit. So what we would do in our proposal is to limit the number of days in which we're providing transportation in South Lane County to, on those days, instead be able to provide service in additional geographic areas. So to identify and provide transportation services in rural areas where currently there are none. So the Rural On-Demand Shuttle pilot would essentially try and identify and find ways that we can provide transportation using a model where we're spreading our resources to more geographic areas where there's currently no access to service.
Great. Thank you for that. Do we have any clarifying questions or comments? Yes. Okay, Josh.
Can you clarify, is the current operating shuttle a pilot or is it an ongoing service?
It is currently operating as a pilot. So there have been various services throughout South Lane County for many years. What's new is the partnership of LCOG and LTD to be able to administer and operate services. So we've been using this time to both new to us administer different types of transportation services, which include things like we have the Cottage Grove connector, we have an origin to destination service, and a metro shuttle, to take what we've learned from those and to be able to consolidate to provide the best, most efficient service we can throughout South Lane County and then hopefully further throughout all of Lane County.
And what's the current funding source for the existing pilot?
That is a great question. So it's a combination of funds. We're using STIF discretionary that LCOG has applied for in the current biennium, STIF formula funds, 5311 funds, and I believe there is also a combination of CARES Act dollars and some older funds that were used throughout the pandemic that support current services. So we're currently looking to use either STIF intercommunity and discretionary funds to be able to support core services that could be matched with STIF formula funds.
Thank you.
Carrie.
Did I understand the write-up correctly that in order to kind of expand to more rural areas, you would say like have a Marcola bus on Tuesday and a Creswell bus on Wednesday or something like that, so that not every community is getting service 5 days a week, but more communities are getting service at least once a week?
Well said. That's exactly right. So it's a way to be able to stretch our resources so that we can do more with less. So if I have a vehicle, rather than saying everyone has access to this vehicle 5 days a week, it's saying one neighborhood can use it on Mondays, another neighborhood can use it on Tuesdays, and so on to make the most of what we can.
Okay, cool. Thanks.
Great.
Thank you.
Great questions. Any other questions before we move on to project number 7? All right, on to number 7, which is the Shopper Shuttle.
Great. I'm joined by Eric Evers, who's going to help us speak to our shopper shuttle. I can just briefly speak to what the shopper shuttle does. This project, however, is for the purchase of a vehicle, not for the operation. But what the vehicle does is very similar to what we just described. We operate a shopper service through RideSource. So for older adults, primarily who need assistance with shopping trips, that's more challenging to do on, say, our fixed route bus or paratransit. This is specifically designed to take people in group social outings, to be able to go on shopping excursions with drivers who are able to assist with our riders' bags, which typically wouldn't take place on, say, like our fixed route buses. So to give people a little bit of additional support, it creates efficiencies for us. So instead of, say, doing a dozen different paratransit trips for individuals on their individual shopping, we can take everyone as a group. And in turn, they can have fun with their friends and peers going on a social outing together. So we need vehicles to be able to do that. We currently have one very aging vehicle that operates the shopper shuttle, and we're hoping to expand the service itself. That's, again, not part of this specific ask, but we do need vehicles to be able to support the service, to be able to take people on these types of trips. So we find that it's both efficient for us as the administrator to be able to group these trips together, and we find that it's better for our riders. They're asking for us to be able to provide these types of services. We also offer a discounted fare to incentivize trips, so $2 for shopper shuttle trips for older adults who are eligible. Speaking to the vehicle purchase itself, Eric?
Not a lot to add other than this vehicle is currently beyond its useful life. It's really past time to replace it, which is why we're looking for funding to assist with that now. But I can answer any specific questions on the vehicle or useful life or anything involving the purchase of a vehicle.
I have a quick question. I'm just curious with the vehicle, the types of ADA accommodations on there.
Yeah, this bus that we would replace it with the bike vehicles, an Arbuck Spirit vehicle. It's a 14-seat. It has 3 ADA positions. If you use all 3 ADA positions, it would have 3 ADAs and 5 regular seating positions.
Great. Any other questions, Josh, or somebody up? Phil, you have your virtual hand up.
Yes, thank you. Could you describe a bit more about this vehicle? For example, how is it powered? And maybe a little bit more about what the thing looks like. I don't know anything about this particular type of vehicle.
Yeah, so if you're familiar with our regular RideSource vehicles, this looks very much like that. It's a little 1 foot longer. The inside makeup's a little bit different. Obviously, the current shopper shuttle looks different than our other RideSources. When we purchase this new one, we will upgrade the graphics on it to look more like the rest of our vehicles, same color scheme as our regular RideSource with the shopper logo on it. Fuel type is a gas as of right now. We've looked at other options as an electric type vehicle. Some of the concern is range. We do have a project in place right now. I'm blanking on where that funding may be coming from, but upgrading the facility at RideSource as well as at the district here to support some electric vehicles. That's not in place, and that won't be in place probably for a couple of years. So the going out for an electric vehicle right now isn't really supported with current infrastructure. I think that's all I can provide.
I think the 2 considerations that we've taken into mind when evaluating propulsion type for these types of vehicles is, 1, the infrastructure. So we need to make sure that we have a lot that's capable of handling electrified vehicles. And then just our RideSource fleet, which includes the shopper shuttle, actually isn't located on our Glenwood lot. It's at Second and Garfield. So it doesn't currently have infrastructure in place that can support a vehicle of that type. That'll be something that we are investigating being able to install in the future. The other is, I think for the reliability of the vehicle, we also look at whether or not an electric vehicle is able to be built with that propulsion type in the factory as opposed to aftermarket, just to be able to ensure that we're able to maintain the estimated useful service life and keep it on the road. So we're noticing there may be some issues if we have to change the propulsion type aftermarket as opposed to having it factory built. I think based on what I've seen, and Eric, feel free to chime in on this, that we're on the cusp of having that technology in place, but not there yet.
Yeah, that's correct, John. With transit vans, the smaller, those are coming off factory lines, electric built, but cutaways, as this is called, is done post factory, which it also increases cost too.
And what's the expected life of a vehicle like this?
7 years, 100,000 miles.
Thank you.
Yes, sir.
All right, thank you for that information. Other questions? All right, well, thank you, gentlemen, appreciate it.
Thank you all for your consideration.
And looking at our agenda, after project overview, we will go to, actually, I think it should be deliberation, but then committee voting and recommendation. But before we do that, I just want to see if there's just one last call. Anybody, you have any additional questions for any of the speakers that we heard tonight in case we missed it? All right. Seeing none. See, Kathy, do you have something on your PowerPoint slide you want to talk through in addition or not?
I can just, I've already covered this. I was going to point out again that there are 90 applications. Our total ask here in Lane County is about 4.4 million without match. The total statewide grant request without match is 61 million. So just wanted to give sense of how competitive it is this year. And then I also just wanted to give the committee a sense of what their role is at this point, which is to review the projects and recommend whether each project should be awarded funding. As we mentioned earlier, there's the option to prioritize as well.
Great. All right. Thank you, Kathleen. That's very helpful. So moving into some committee discussion and then ultimately voting and a recommendation to the Lane Transit District Board. You've all heard there's some options that we have. We can discuss these, and we could, as one option, as I understand it, we could provide committee comments to particular projects and have those forwarded to the board for their consideration. That's one option. Another option would be we could still do that, but we could also attempt to rank the projects as well. And one of the things I kind of went into this initially reviewing that I was hoping for, but it sounds like it won't work, just process-wise, but I was kind of hoping that we would be able to rank these in tiers where I've seen committees in the past where if you have some very similar projects, maybe you do like a tier 1, 3 projects there, tier 2, 2 projects and so on. But in this case, it sounds like procedural wise that the form and things we want to submit, if we were to attempt to rank these, it would be 1 through 7. And I'm really interested in hearing everybody's thoughts on this. I guess to start us off, I'll just take a moment here to state, my view of it. I think for me, it's somewhat challenging. For example, looking at the intercity projects that it's going to be hard for me to rank something that's, for example, Eugene Florence Connector versus Diamond Express. I mean, to me, those are meeting pretty much the same goals. They're just different geographic areas. So I'm a little hard pressed to try to figure out like how would I rank those. And so that's an example where I was kind of hoping to put, you know, those inner city ones like in one tier, but that's not an option. But let me pause that. Just wanted to state that as an example, one person's perspective, but interested in other committee members and what you might be thinking, first of all, about ranking or not ranking, and then we can dive into comments and then some voting after that. Kind of open it up here to the floor. If anybody has an idea, thought, just raise your hand and get you teed up. All right. Yes, Cosette.
Sure. I'll just say typically and historically, we have chosen not to rank our projects. And philosophically, that's because then we are competing against each other within our region, while these should be competing statewide. And I think it makes it really easy potentially to say, from a statewide level, that one is less important than another from a statewide level, when in fact, it's not.
Right.
So I really recommend that we do not prioritize.
Right. It's a great perspective. Thank you for that, Cosette. Let's see, I see some virtual hands. How about Phil and then Kelly after that?
Great, thank you. I completely agree with that last comment, although that was not what I was going to talk about. And if this may be only marginally on topic, and if it is, I'll keep it really short. As the state is moving ahead with its plans to deal with transportation electrification, it's clear to me that we are pushing the edge of when we can buy non-electric vehicles that will be still in use during the time when we should be very, very rapidly moving away from electric vehicles. So that's the one concern I have about the proposal for purchase of a vehicle. And the board is going to have to think about how to move rapidly toward electrification, especially as it buys vehicles that will have a life extended into the 30s, the 2030s. And we're obviously getting there at this point. I completely support the continued operation of these rural routes. The routes between Florence, Eugene, Florence, and North, and the inland routes. I think we need them. I agree that trying to prioritize them, it doesn't make a whole lot of sense. Given the number of competing statewide applications, I don't know what we do about it. I think we just have to ask for it.
Right. Okay. Thank you, Phil. Appreciate that. Let's see, Kelly, you had your hand up a moment ago. I think you're on mute there.
I did have my hand up, and maybe I shouldn't because I've got as projects in the hat as well. But I do support what Phil and Cosette have said so far about prioritizing and putting that at the statewide level.
Right.
Sorry, my son is leaving for soccer now, in case everyone wants to know. And I agree, like with Dave, I think you had a good perspective about if we take one of these rural routes out of the mix, that leaves our connected system disconnected. And how is it just a disincentive for people to be able to use a public transportation network? So appreciate the comments that have been made so far. And then Phil, I think as far as electrifying our fleets for rural transit, hopefully what we're seeing with the National Electric Infrastructure Program in Oregon, we'll see some more ways for us to be able to rely on charging to be able to move in that direction. Yeah. So thank you for the comments, and I'm sorry for the distractions in my background.
No problem. Thank you, Kelly. Thanks for your comments. Let's see, other comments. I'm going to go out on a limb here and say I feel like from this discussion that it's safe to say there's not necessarily a strong push to rank these this time. I'm seeing a lot of head nods, so I feel like the next best step for us is to.
I think Vidal had a comment.
I'm sorry. Yeah, Vidal.
Yeah, thank you. And I agree with all the sentiments here too. One thing we want to be mindful of too, though, is, hearing that local voice above us. In other words, folks who will be seeing our work right now, I think it's important that they hear it. And what I mean by that is clearly every project here is worthy. Okay. But nevertheless, if we do have comments of thoughts around why we feel this one is important, not necessarily better than the other one, but why we feel this one is important, I think for the record, that should be stated and put in there. Because again, it's that local voice that's constantly being said that makes the difference ultimately, maybe not on this project, but maybe on another one it will. So that's just my little brief comment on that.
That's a great comment. I thank you for saying that. Yeah, as we've heard, there's an opportunity to provide comment. Let me ask staff maybe really fast. I know this is being recorded. What I was thinking process-wise, we have about a half hour left, a little less, but I thought just to keep it in order, I would just go down the list 1 through 7, ask for comments. We could provide those, and then from a staff perspective, are you then afterwards able to take these comments and write those up as it moves forward to LTD, or what would that look like? Oh, right there.
We actually have a slide ready to go.
Oh,
and,
perfect.
Kate's going to be our recorder and take down any notes,
all right,
comments that come up.
All
right. Are you saying?
Perfect. Okay, good deal. No pressure, Kate. Right. All eyes on you. All right. Well, Kate is getting teed up here to write some comments. So let's do that. To keep us on track, I'm going to start us off with project number 1. Again, this was City of Eugene applying for the Downtown Riverfront Circulator Pilot. Just a call for comments, and if you would, if you have a comment, just raise your hand, whether in person or virtual, and that'll help us get this teed up. So any comments on this? Thoughts? Josh Kaczynski.
Yeah, given the new development in the riverfront area of Eugene, including some upcoming affordable housing development, I feel like this is an important project to connect those communities to the rest of the city. There's also existing in Eugene, not as much north-south service in that area as there is east-west service. And so this might balance out some of that.
Great. Thank you for that comment, Josh. Carrie has her hand up.
I think the north-south comment is a really good one because this is all focused from, say, the river going south. And so I realize it's a different project, but crossing the river might also connect people to other resources, especially those living right adjacent in some of that housing. But what I also liked about this is kind of capturing that new blood of all of the housing moving in there and setting new habits while they're setting up their new lifestyle. So I think that's a good strength. My only other comment is this type of circulator has been tried before and it hasn't always been successful. And so how is this type of circulator different? How is it made successful when the others were not?
Okay, great. That's a great question.
That's not necessarily one we want to.
Okay, yeah, I was good. Okay, yeah. Okay, so internal question there. All right. Is the committee okay if I invite the city's speaker, Rob Interfield, back just to answer this question? Sure. Okay, great. Yeah, come on up, Rob, if you would, to the microphone so folks online can hear.
So in terms of try before, you referring to the Breeze service? Because
Breeze, we had MGO.
right.
You know, neither of those really stuck much with
Sure.
riders.
Well, yeah, I mean, I think there's so much more multifamily housing in this area right now. And I can tell you, like, some of it does not have a ton of parking. So the developers of the riverfront neighborhood are really looking they really want transit because people aren't going to be able to have a lot of cars there. Secondly, the MGO was not a circulator. It was an on-demand service. And so that's very different. And I mean, in my opinion, it wasn't well implemented either. It was very much on the fly and not well thought out. And then the third thing is, I mean, the Breeze was really connecting it was like a long time ago, right? I mean, that was like almost 20 years ago, or not 20, but 15 years ago. And it connected the U of O to downtown Eugene to Valley River Center. And I don't know what the metrics were on the Breeze, so I couldn't really speak to how effective it is. But I think like a couple of things that we heard from the community to make this successful were to make the buses branded, which I know like there's some issues with LTD in that. But if we're running small buses, those wouldn't be part of the main LTD fleet anyway. So I think it would be more viable to brand them. And secondly, make it free, especially for the pilot. And I think that's really important too for visitors. You know, we have people coming to Eugene for football games, there's a lot of conferences at the Graduate Hotel and other places near downtown. And I think that, you know, having a free circulator that's really well branded can really have that potential to set a new habit and break that kind of mold maybe that from what you're talking about. So I don't know if that answers your question.
I'm glad you guys kind of considered those and we'll learn from that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. And that's why we do pilots, right? To test out things and see what we can learn from them. Thanks.
Thank you, Rob. Thank you, Carrie. Great question. One comment I'll jump in and add is, so like I was mentioning, I oversee the transportation department at University of Oregon, and one of our responsibilities is we have a few different shuttles. We have the Duck Rides student shuttle, and we have an Access shuttle. And I'm just mentioning that as an example of how both of those shuttle programs use smaller vehicles than like a traditional LTD bus. And we've found those programs to really have a growing demand of people, and it's not completely apples to apples, but there are some similarities here in that you have LTD with the larger bus system, and then maybe the city looking at something like this with smaller vehicles to serve as a circulator. And then I've heard LTD talking about being more open to bike share. So I feel like each of those are like different tiers of transportation. And I'm very excited to see this as a potential pilot. And I think it could complement or supplement LTD, but I don't believe the way I read it would replace anything. So I feel like it could be complementary. Other thoughts or comments before we go to project 2? Yes, Cosette.
Thank you, Chair. I appreciate the presentation. I appreciate the project. I also just want to mention that LTD and the city are continuing to have conversations. This is a very rich, in terms of dollars, proportion for a fairly small geographic area in our metropolitan area. So just taking a look and making sure that we're using those wisely. I do think piloting is a great way to do this. I think that again, we'll get some experience and we'll learn what works and what doesn't work. So what the pilot gives us an opportunity to do that. We can change it too. So the pilot can look different in the end than it does in the beginning. And again, that's part of the beauty of a pilot is it gives us the opportunity to try new things. And again, LTD and the city are still having a conversation about what that looks like. So just wanted to put that up.
Yeah, thank you, Cosette. Great. Let's see. Looks like Joshua online. You have your hand up.
Yeah, so I just have a question that I just kind of recently thought about. I was just kind of wondering if they could speak about maybe because it's a pilot on what the hours of service will look like, and also I know, since we're back in school, what the pilot will look like during the university off time during the summer, on what they're expecting, maybe possibly any sort of ridership levels to kind of be at when school's not in session.
Hi, Joshua, those are really good questions. I can't answer those right now. Like, I just don't have that information at my fingertips, but I think that from the community, we definitely heard like evening service was important. But I couldn't answer that about, but I think to, what Cosette said earlier, I think if we start in like January, we'd have several months under our belt. We can see what kind of student ridership we're getting and whether it makes sense to make any changes like during the off months. So thank you for that question.
So what you're saying is it's more of a local demand instead of like, for example, tourist or students or stuff like that?
Not necessarily. I think it would serve a lot of different markets, including visitors, students, people who live downtown, including seniors and people who live in affordable housing. So it's not really serving any one particular market. I'm just saying that, like what Cosette said earlier, like there is the potential to make changes over the summer. It doesn't mean we should. It's just something we'll talk about. And I think, and I don't know what the hours would be, but that's just a thing we'll need to look at more. And obviously, like I talked earlier, like the longer you run it for during the day, I mean, obviously it costs more. So, I mean, that's all in money. There's only so much money to go around. That's why we're here, right?
Great. Thank you, Rob.
Okay, thanks.
Thank you.
Joshua, for that question. Just in the interest of time, I'm kind of looking at the clock. We're on project one. I want to make sure we keep moving forward. So thank you, everybody, for those comments. Let's jump down to the next one. This is the Eugene-Florence connector route from LCOG. Any committee comments on this one that you would like to extend forward?
This is Eugene.
Oh, yeah.
And I wanted to make a really positive comment about this particular connector because Florence is part of Lane County, which is a huge county, basically the size of Connecticut. And it's the one connection between Florence and Eugene for a group of people who live there who are seniors and low income, and I think it's really important for that reason.
Great. Thank you, Eugene. Appreciate that perspective. Yes, Susie.
Speaking up as someone who lives in West County, this route, one of the volunteer activities I am part of is Sayusla Vision, which is a community building organization in the West County region. We surveyed the entire community, and transportation between Florence and Eugene was like at the top of the community's list. So seeing this bus service launch was super important. As the presenter said, so many of our residents don't have a transportation option to get back and forth. So this is really vital.
Great. Thank you so much, Susie. All right, not seeing any more hands. Just in the interest of time, I'm going to keep us moving here to project number 3. Yes, Florence to Yachats connector. I'm going to start us off maybe with a comment. I remember years ago, this was kind of first being discussed as an option, and that this really was a transportation desert in a sense of folks who didn't have their own vehicle. And it's just been really great to see it continue over the years. And I just want to make sure we don't step backwards in creating that desert again. So, other thoughts or comments? Yes, Susie.
I'll chime in again on this one. The connection piece for this one, for instance, connecting with the Florence to Eugene bus, so it allows people north and south on the county to make those connections. So again, it's just super important. In addition to, this is a really fun one for people who live in Florence to go back and forth to Yachats and go hiking or go shopping or do recreation. But the transit connections are really vital.
Right. Excellent. Thank you. Any other comments? Yes, Fido.
I would just add that this makes connectivity statewide happen because it's pretty much the only link.
Yeah, Great perspective. Thank you. All right. Not seeing any other hands up. We'll go ahead and move over to project number 4, the Diamond Express from LTD. Any comments on this? Yeah, Cosette.
I would just say, and this is general for all of the rural services that we're talking about, is that statewide transportation network and the fact that all of these fill a critical and crucial gap. And if any of these were not there, it would create a new gap in our statewide transit network. And to your point, we shouldn't take a step back.
Right.
We should definitely be making sure that we continue these services. They're critical for the communities who they serve.
Great, thank you. Yes, Carrie.
I think likewise, all of these connectors, they're also increasing safety. And I appreciated that all of those applications mentioned that these are not easy roads to drive on. And the more we provide a good option for people who are maybe not the safest or the most confident drivers, the safer it is for everyone.
Mm-hmm. Great, thank you. Other thoughts or comments?
If I can say this, I'm a little extreme on this, but Oak Ridge is pretty much on an island. Right. When you look at Lane County wide, Oak Ridge is pretty much on an island, and this connector here is really making that island happen or see something. So this is very important here.
Great, thank you. Yeah, I would echo that, and just a quick perspective here that I've experienced on a personal level. My son, who just graduated, he's go to Twin Rivers Charter School, and I know there were several students at that school who came on the bus from Oak Ridge, and that school was so important to their education. And Oak Ridge has some pretty limited resources, and I think education is one of those. And for us to be able to have this transportation connection that connects them to a broader metropolitan area is really critical for our youth. Let's see, Kelly, you have your hand up.
Yeah, I think I just wanted to add for these rural routes on the state transit network, how important they are for the active transportation network as a whole. These buses are all equipped with bike racks to support people that have mode transitions from bus to bike and then walking to bus or bike. So I think that they're offering another modal opportunity for folks once they get to their destination, both from a recreational standpoint and from a kind of just a logistical standpoint.
Great. Thank you, Kelly. Good point. All right, well, to keep us moving on, we got about 13 minutes left. Not seeing any more hands. Let's move down to project number 5, Florence Mobility Hub. Any committee comments on this? Susie.
I don't know how many other committee members have caught one of our bus connections at Grocery Outlet. It's great to have the option. It's great that they can all meet there, but literally there is nothing there. It is the street beside the grocery store. There is a really dilapidated bus shelter with 0 amenities, 0. So yeah, there's a big need for this mobility hub there, and it will be very, very welcome for this community and for making a safe and accessible connection for all of these services.
Right, thank you. And Kelly, it looks like your hand's up.
Yeah, and I think Susie said it really well, but this is a key transit hub that the city of Florence has worked really hard to develop and support and to incentivize, transit providers to be there and made it really accommodating for transit providers to have this space. And now we're encouraging this mobility hub, and I think it's just a really important project to, further the initiative of transit along the coast.
Thank you, Kelly. Any other comments? I guess I would echo what Susie and Kelly said about the importance of the infrastructure to support the service itself. And we all know it does rain a fair amount on the coast. So getting something that is more welcoming to the riders and safe with lighting, things like that is so essential. And really pleased to see this on the list. So, all right, without any other hands up, I'm going to keep us moving here. Thank you. We're going to move down to project number 6, which is the Rural Lane County On-Demand Shuttle. Any committee comments on this? Yes, Carrie.
I liked the approach, kind of the inventive approach of being able to expand the service area with being strategic about which days. It sort of reminds me of times in the past where you'd hear about small communities that they get the train that comes there on Tuesdays. And so you just go on Tuesdays and that's just how it works.
Right.
And so I like the inventiveness of it in a way that helps to expand service to more people.
Right.
So I think it's being very strategic in that use of funds.
Great. Thank you for that. Other comments on this project? Kelly. Thank you.
Could add that as we were developing a transit development plan for our link lane services, we did a lot of community outreach countywide and heard a lot of people experiencing transportation barriers, and this type of project will help to start to not solve all the problems, but be another option for people who need transportation options.
Thank you. Fido?
What I appreciate about this one is that it's flexible, you know, because when you're out in areas like that, obviously flexibility is key to be able to deliver some type of service. Right. And so this actually affords that.
Yeah, great. Good point. Thank you. All right. Not seeing any more hands up, so let's go ahead and move to the last one, number 7, and then after this we will go ahead and look for a motion. This is the shopper shuttle. Any comments on this?
Again, this is Eugene. This, I think, is a really important service for people who are elderly and have a disability. I happen to fit both categories, so, but I think it's really important in terms of being able to go shopping at a grocery store and the service of the driver carrying the groceries to the house with the person is unbelievably important, I think. Mm-hmm. And I'm pleased that it's here.
Great. Thank you, Eugene. Other comments? I would echo that as well. And this one I thought was unique and creative in that, like Eugene mentioned, there's that extra service of helping with the bags and things like that. And so important to connect folks with this need, you know, and to have that assistance. So I feel like it would be a big gap if we're not continuing to replace these outdated vehicles. So, all right. Well, without any other hands up, let's we'll go ahead and wrap up the comment here. And we're on agenda item 5C. So this is committee voting and recommendation. And it looks like Kathleen has up on the screen a draft motion. And let me just call to the committee here to see if anybody would like to entertain a motion.
I move to recommend to the LTD Board of Directors the STN and discretionary project lists with comments, and each project should be funded.
Thank you, Josh. We have a motion on the floor.
Phil Barnhart seconds.
Phil Barnhart, a second. Thank you. Any discussion on the motion before we call for a vote? All right. All those in favor, please say aye and raise your hand online as well to help. Aye.
Aye.
Okay. I think that was everybody. Any opposed? No abstentions. All right. Looks like we have a unanimous vote from our voting members. Thank you, everybody, for that. We made some good progress here. We got a couple minutes left. Just our last agenda item before adjournment is next or future meeting agendas. Kathleen, did you want to cover that at all? I know we talked about shifting the next meeting date, but you might have other stuff as well.
Yeah, so like I said earlier, I will get out an updated invitation to everyone for November 4th instead of the 5th. And at our next meeting, we will shift our focus to STIF formula. And Kate and I will send out another packet that has STIF formula projects in it. And on the 4th, we'll start working our way through those projects.
All right, excellent. Yeah, and thank you to the staff for you all putting together this packet and to the applicants for your presentations. Really wonderful to hear these good project ideas out there, so thank you. And with that, we'll go ahead and adjourn. Thank you. Have a great evening.